With us, our guest is Leah Michael. Leah is a workers' comp attorney with NRS Injury Law that's based out of Cleveland but operates all over the state of Ohio. She's been an attorney since 2015. She's been a super lawyer, rising star from 2019 through the current time. She's the mother of Biscuit the French Bulldog, and she started with our law firm and is a beloved former team member. Thanks for being here, Leah.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today.
Briefly, why don't you tell us what your current law practice is?
Currently, I represent injured workers before the Ohio Industrial Commission for their workers' compensation claims in the state of Ohio.
I think one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on and to discuss is your journey becoming an attorney. I think you're like the perfect example that the American dream still exists in the United States. So why don't you talk about your background and how you ended up going to law school?
I grew up in rural Northwest Ohio, and I was a cheerleader in high school, enjoyed that a lot. And then once I got to college, I wasn't quite sure what my path would look like. So I entered school, and then I had some mentoring from a former federal court judge who helped me realize that my two biggest skill sets, reading and writing, are two things that I really enjoyed, would really fit the model of being an attorney. And that set me down that path. So I obtained an associate's degree from Northwest State Community College in paralegal studies and completed my bachelor's degree at the University of Toledo. And that's also where I attended law school.
You worked throughout your studies.
Correct.
Did you go through the day program or the night program?
I was a night student during law school. I worked here for you for most of that time, full-time, as a litigation paralegal. But I was first hired as the receptionist and sort of ascended to the ranks of litigation paralegal, and that carried me through law school.
Right. I thought that was kind of neat. You started as the receptionist, you became a paralegal, and then you became an attorney. And I just heard that starting next year, I believe, they're discontinuing the night program.
They've been talking about that for a few years. I hope that doesn't happen because it is a wonderful program. It allows people that maybe don't have the means to not work during the day and attend law school in place of that. It gives them the chance to work and still go to school to obtain their law school diploma.
I think that a lot of law students that don't work during law school are really missing out. When you went to law school, did it help a lot that you actually knew how the game was played and that there was actually a purpose behind some of these classes?
Yeah, I think it helped a lot, definitely in the classes that pertain to the work that I was doing here at the time. But it really gave me the opportunity to see how an injury becomes a case and ends up. I learned the court process while I was working through law school, and I think that that gave me a leg up on a lot of other students that maybe weren't aware of exactly how just simple things like filings work or what courts to be filing which documents, and it's sort of glossed over. It's not really taught in law school, or we don't dive deep into that.
You started working with us, like what year was that?
I think I started back in 2011, if I remember correctly.
And you were in college then?
I was in law school then, so
Okay.
I was working for a bankruptcy attorney here in town, and she was very supportive of me sort of going for better opportunities that would serve me well in my legal career, and she had heard that there was a receptionist opening here. And so I took the chance and applied for that position. And really, I was hoping to gain from that job was learning how to market, because you're the best at that in this area.
Thanks. As far as
Don't sound so enthusiastic.
no, and when we talk about marketing, I think the point is that attorneys do a lot better job when they have really good cases. And part of the problem is, you can do a great job, but if you don't have a strong case, it's tough to get a good result.
Yeah, and that, I think, is something that attorneys sort of fall into that trap of thinking a case isn't good enough because it may be difficult or the client is difficult. But I really feel that it's my job as an attorney to make it a good case. And there are various ways to do that. It may require a little digging, but really, when you get down to it, it's on our shoulders to present the case as best we can.
Your practice that you're dealing with now, you actually have to talk to the clients and try to work with them to build the case to win the hearing.
Yes.
I mean, there's some areas of law where you really don't have to have much of any contact with the client. In your type of practice, yeah, you need the medical evidence, but the client could, destroy the case if the client doesn't testify correctly.
Right, and that's a really hard thing to do, is you have to build that trust between the client and yourself. You hope that the direction that you give the client is followed, but at the end of the day, there's nothing we can do to make the client do what we ask of them. So it's a tightrope to walk, and it can be overwhelming in my line of work because it is a volume practice, meaning, there are literally thousands of clients that we service, so it's a lot.
When you were at our law firm, we didn't have any dogs, and why don't you tell the story about how we ended up having dogs?
Right, so you are always somebody that likes facts and figures, and I really, really wanted a dog, but I was a single person. I didn't want to leave my dog at home alone all day, and so I just started sending articles here and there about how having emotional support animals helps in the office space, and sort of convinced you that that was a good idea. We first had Nancy, your paralegal, bring her dog Penny, and everybody fell in love with Penny, and then it just sort of grew from there.
Right. I remember when you told me that, and we looked at the lease, and the lease specifically said you can't have dogs. And I said, well, we could always try it. And the funny thing was, the people who came up and played with the dogs the most were usually the people that worked for the building.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't think they ever read their own lease, so that's what I thought was kind of funny. And then, currently, we normally might have, 5, 6 dogs here every day. So, and then let's talk about, so we were able to bring dogs to work, and you got Biscuit. So
I did.
Explain why Biscuit, and the thing about Biscuit that I thought was entertaining, there's a lot of things entertaining about Biscuit, but Biscuit is a French bulldog, and he's tan, and he actually looks like a biscuit. Is
Yes.
that part of the reason he got the name?
Yes, and the friends actually that I bought him from, I hadn't decided on a name, and the day that I went to pick him up, they had a little folder together of vet records, and when I opened it, it said Biscuit, and Biscuit was one of the names on the list that I was considering, and I said, well, that has to be his name. But I made sure with my nephews that that was acceptable to them. But yeah, that's how it came to be, is Biscuit.
So what I remember is, I think you had a list that you compiled of 150 names or something.
There were a lot of names in the running.
your plan, and I don't think you've accomplished it yet, you were going to get a girl dog named Honey. So you're going to have Biscuit and Honey.
Was always the plan, and instead I got 2 more male dogs. And none of them looked or fit the description of a dog named Honey, so
Okay.
we skipped that one.
You've been practicing now for what, 9 years?
9 years.
Wow.
It'll be a decade next year.
Wow.
I know, it goes fast.
Let's talk about initially lessons you've learned along the way.
Lessons I've learned along the way is to stay organized, stay on top of things as best you can, and really just have various different ways to track what you're doing. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. For instance, don't solely rely on your case management software or your email. It has to be a combination of different things, because inevitably something will and can go wrong. So I think organization is key to being a successful attorney.
Is it what you thought it would be?
Being a lawyer,
Yeah.
I think I was prepared to be a lawyer throughout law school. It was really taught to us that this is a lifestyle, and I knew that that was the case, that successful attorneys live and breathe their work, and it's hard to have things outside of that because you have a duty to the client. So occasionally the work is lacking that fun factor, and you have to create that any way you can while you're doing it.
So you've worked for a few different law firms, and I'm assuming that that's helped you gain some perspective. You've worked with a lot of different attorneys, and normally the lesson that I always tell people is, steal all the best things from the people, and you have to put it in your personality. Steal all the different best things, and the things you think that the attorneys are doing that are stupid, don't do any of those.
Well, yeah, I would tend to agree that having great mentors has helped me get to where I am and kept me in the practice of law. It provides an attorney with just somebody that you can run ideas by, learn how they got to where they are, and if that doesn't work for you, like you're saying, you put your own spin on it. I think I've done that. I've been told before, I was wearing a Carhartt winter hat a few years ago, and an individual said, attorneys don't wear Carhartt. And I thought to myself, well, attorneys can wear anything. I don't typically wear a 3-piece suit every day. That is a rare occasion. The reason for that is because I want my clients to be comfortable and not afraid of me, or think that they have to conceal things, or be nervous.
So what would you tell young attorneys that are just starting out, and what would you say you wish you knew back when, in 2013 or 14?
I think what I wish I knew back then, and maybe while I was in law school, is to really have an idea of whether I wanted to do civil work, criminal work, transactional work. That wasn't something that I necessarily paid any attention to. So I ended up in the practice that I'm in because of that's what I know. It's very hard to get out of that once you're comfortable in it. So I think my advice to people considering law school or those that are in law school and getting ready to take the bar exam or graduate should really take a long, hard look at what they expect out of the practice of law and then choose your path accordingly.
Something that I think is different since the pandemic is remote work, and I know before the pandemic, I signed up 95% of my new clients in person, and now we probably sign up 90 or 95% of the clients through DocuSign, and we don't meet in person, and most of it is because the clients don't even want to meet in person anymore.
Yeah.
So talk about, you've worked in the office, you've worked remote. Talk about what your current situation is compared to past jobs.
My current situation is sort of a hybrid role. I have the flexibility to work from home, but I also have office space. And then I can attend the workers' comp hearings remotely as well. But there are times when I'll appear in person for various different reasons. The client may prefer that. It may be the type of hearing that I'm taking would be better served by an in-person appearance. So the flexibility is nice, and I think it can be a big pro for somebody that maybe wants that flexibility or wants to work from home for whatever reason. It could be due to childcare or whatnot. But remote work, I would say 100% remote work would be very isolating for an individual. I think it would be very difficult for an attorney to only work remotely or virtually with clients. Now, I know that there are those out there, but for me personally, I think an in-person touch is still necessary on most, if not all, of the cases.
So what percentage of time currently do you work remote versus in the office?
I'd say about 80% remote, 20% in the office.
So is it difficult to work on your own?
It can be. There are days, being a self-motivator, not having somebody there around to sort of keep you on track or on pace can be difficult.
One of the things that I've thought is, because I'll get attorneys that, I'm more of the old-fashioned where I'd really prefer my attorneys to be in the office or my staff, but I do have sometimes attorneys and staff that are 90% remote too. But my preference is, from a teamwork building perspective, it's better if the person's in the office. And I would think, not that you're a grizzled veteran, but what I'm saying is don't you think it would be more difficult if you were a brand new attorney?
To work remotely?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it can be very isolating, and I know that in my current situation it is at times. You miss out on that collegiality that you'd have if you were working in an office space with everybody on your team.
The law firm you work for, they handle cases all over the state of Ohio.
That's correct, yes.
Your main office is in Cleveland?
Our main office is in Euclid, actually.
Okay,
and then
suburb.
There's a second office in downtown Cleveland. We have an office in Columbus, one in Dayton, Cincinnati, and Toledo.
How often do you actually spend time in the Toledo office?
That's the 20%.
So, Leah, you've practiced several different areas of law. How did you decide that workers' comp is what you wanted to pretty much dedicate your legal career to?
I worked and handled personal injury cases and Social Security cases. I also did a little bit of estate planning work. Workers' compensation for me is very personal. My father was permanently totally disabled, and so I feel as though I'm helping people that I know their situation, I can relate to them and their situation. That's how I grew up. So I know how devastating work injuries can be on everyday families, and that's why I do what I do.
Why don't you explain how a workers' comp case operates and how it's different than a trial on TV?
Yeah, so I always have clients, they want to go to court, they want to talk to the judge. At the entry level of a workers' comp claim, after you're first initially hurt, your hearing is before the Ohio Industrial Commission, if you have a hearing. And so the people that are there listening to whatever issue you have before them, they're not judges, they're known as hearing officers. And I have to explain that to clients a lot. And I don't think it's a bad thing that they think it's a judge. It is still somebody that is looking at the facts of the case and ultimately making a decision on their claim. But there are appeals that then can end up in court. And for a client, that's a lot to digest. how they got from one setting to another, and they may be in both settings at the same time with an appealed issue in the court, just like you see on TV with a judge in a robe, and they may still have other issues pending before the Ohio Industrial Commission. It's difficult to get people to understand that the claim is still moving, but we have to do our best to educate individuals on how and why they're in those two places. The hearings, when you go before a hearing officer, are public, so the door remains open. A lot of clients don't like that, and I can understand why, because you're discussing very personal information, but it's just part of the process and something that the clients need to be prepared for walking in.
Right. And another thing I think that's different is normally when we have a hearing, it's over one very narrow specific issue. So it might be, should they be allowed to get their physical therapy? And the client wants to tell the whole story of the accident and why there was a safety violation, and that really doesn't have anything to do with the issue.
Exactly. And that leads to upset clients usually in the end, because they can't understand that the hearing is on that very narrow specific topic and that the other information is totally irrelevant. The hearings typically are only 20 minutes, so you have to talk fast and get it all out for the hearing officer, and sometimes that's eaten up by a client that lacks focus or just doesn't understand that what they're saying is not really helpful to the issue at hand.
And I think about 90% of attorneys that don't do workers' comp don't even understand what goes on.
Right. I think a lot of people that I know that find out that I handle workers' comp always say, oh my gosh, that's a lot. You have to have a lot of clients, and I do. And then the next question is, how do you deal with all of that, all of these individuals that are hurt and upset because we're the ones that they're coming to with all of their questions and they need answers as quickly as possible? It becomes overwhelming very quickly.
It used to be that every workers' comp hearing was in person, and now it can be in person, but we have a ton of them remote.
That was a result of COVID-19 that the remote possibility even happened.
Yeah.
And there was some talk I think about a year and a half ago, about maybe going back to all in person.
And I don't think anybody wants to.
Right. I don't think the hearing officers want that. I don't think anybody wants that. It's certainly easier for the clients, because a client to attend a workers' comp hearing, it can put a lot of burden on them financially to get to the building, to pay for parking, depending on which hearing office you are at.
And it's good for the law firms, because the whole point is now you can handle a hearing in Athens, from Cincinnati or Toledo or Cleveland or wherever. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole lot easier. So let's talk about life outside of being an attorney. Is it what you expected?
Life outside being an attorney?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to draw sort of a line between the attorney and your own personal life. I try to just, when I'm out and about, I don't advertise that I'm an attorney. I don't tell people that.
What do you mean by the fact that you don't mention to people that you're an attorney?
I mean, when I'm out socializing in my own private time, I don't, carry a card on me and hand it out, or things like that. I want to unplug from work and spend my time how I see fit, and I don't want anybody to infringe on that. So it's not that I am not proud of being an attorney. I definitely am, but it's a job like any other job. It has its pros and cons.
Is it surprising, like the amount of hours you have to work compared to what you thought it would be?
I think that there have been times where I've needed to adjust and not put so much of my effort and time into work, and have clear time for work and clear time for play outside of work. Is it what I expected? Yes, it is. I knew that early on that it was going to be a lifestyle choice to practice law. there are a lot of variables that impact different things, like going on vacations, things like that can be canceled at the last minute if there's something going on in a case requiring your attention.
What else would you like to tell younger people if you had to give them some advice? Like, should they become an attorney, or is it a big mistake?
I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a big mistake, although I've had many of those days where I've thought to myself, this is a huge mistake, what have I done? If I just think the right mindset has to be there. And as I was mentioning, when I entered law school, I knew that I just needed to take those 3.5 years that it took me and just focus on school, and that I could get through it. And I proved to myself that I could, and luckily I had job opportunity available right out of the gate that got me started. It's not as, lawyers are different than I'd say from other professions because there's not a lot of hands-on, quote-unquote, training. So you have to look for those opportunities yourself and find somebody who's willing to serve the role as mentor, to give you the advice necessary to be successful.
Thanks for being here, Leah. It's good to hear your perspective, and we're all happy that you're super successful, and we look forward to seeing you and Biscuit in the future.
Absolutely, I'll bring him next time.